Hello everyone. I hope you're doing great. Welcome to this another session of our 10 SAPUI5 projects for beginner series. This is project 8 and we have been covering quite a lot of stuff in our past 7 projects. For example, some controls, different controls, what they do, how do we use them. Even we have covered the reusing some custom library also. So in this project 8, I thought maybe we can do something related to, why can't we have our own kind of custom control. So we'll try to build one custom control, right? And along with that, we'll try to, reuse or reuse another third-party library, which is very commonly used, and we'll try to use it. So what we are going to build is a custom control, and that custom control, if you look at the, left-hand side on the bottom, is nothing but a captcha. Because I thought every project, normally everywhere, I think whenever there's a sign up or login, or sometimes during many places you see those captcha controls coming. So why can't we create a reusable captcha control, right? So we'll create that captcha control, and then we'll try to also bring in another third-party library to see how it works, right? So meanwhile, let me just open the browser, right? And then we see, let it open. Yes, so let's see what is a captcha control captcha looks like, right? Yeah, these is something like this you get. So let's just look at it, right? So it's like some it has some label. There's a label it which shows you certain values, and then you have to input those values. If they're same, it allows you to go ahead. If they're different, it gives you an error. And there is an option to refresh also to get that new captcha value, right? So we'll try to make this captcha, this custom control. Okay, now before that we start with the code. Okay, let me just quickly create the project so that at least we are meanwhile the project is being set up, and then we can walk through certain things which are being used, right? So I'm trying to use easy UI5 one. Let it run. Let's name it as captcha, and com.t. We'll use the static web server, XML view. Yeah, let's call it as a main one, and we'll use local one. Yes, let it install, and meanwhile let's just look at few things. Now I'm just going to an API reference, and if you just let's just look at input control, right? So if you look at this input control, let it come. So it has these tabs here, right? And primarily this is what defines a control, right? For example, there are properties, right? What all properties it has. It can have an input value, it can have a field width, it can have maximum length, right? And it can have an aggregation, as in if it can contain anything as its children, right? What all different elements it can contain, associations in case you want it to be associated to anything else, and then events, right? So primarily our captcha control, since it'll be like a combination of labels, right, which is to display the random alphanumeric code, and there is an input, then there is two buttons, right, refresh and submit. So it will be a combination of that, right? And it shall have some properties, it shall have some aggregation, it shall have some events. So it shall be something similar to these kind of things which we'll do, right? So let's meanwhile see where we are. So it is still going on, so let it run. So it is done, and you can see the folder is already created, right? So let me just quickly close this, and standard we have got all everything, right? So in order to create our control, what I'll do is I'll create one folder named control. Inside I will create one file, captcha.js, right? So this is the file, captcha, I think I missed it. Captcha.js, right? So this is the file which we will use to actually define our control. So before we actually start creating the control, let's look at one thing. Okay. SAPUI.core.control. So this is the base control which we will use to extend to create our own captcha. It is like uh, we'll have this parent module, right? It's a parent class using which we will kind of extend it and add our things. So what all things control has is, we have mentioned, was it has properties, aggregation, and events. Yes, this is like a part of, as what we call it, as a metadata. Apart from it, it has something called as rendering, right? We'll talk about rendering once we are actually get into the details. But rendering is like how what controls will be written onto the screen, right? How it will be written, and then where things will get initialized, that also has a separate method. So we'll look at that. So what I will do is, let's go back to our code, right? And we don't need this, right? What we need is core dot control, right? This is what we need, which we will extend, right? And what we can do is return control dot extend, and here we will define our name of the control. So in our case, since it is com.te.captcha dot where is this control? It is in control dot captcha. Okay. So now this is, we are trying to define our control, that okay, this will be our control, right? But what all this thing control will contain. So for that, as I already have shown you, that we'll have some properties, aggregation, and events. So how do we define these properties, aggregation, and events, which is nothing but we call it as metadata, right? And we'll define here. For example, first thing is, what is properties it has. So what properties does our metadata will contain? So maybe let this has a thing called as title, right? So let's call it as a heading. It will have an heading. Okay, what is the heading? This we need to specify here is type. It is a string, right? And apart from it, what else do we need? We'll have this captcha control, which will have a heading, and then we'll have another property, which is its value. We'll see the use of value. It will be something like uh, something, for example, for input also you have, for label also you have values, right? Different things. Similarly, we are trying to have two properties. One is the heading, which will be shown on the top, and whatever heading you will provide, it will be set on the top. And then other is value, which is the value of the captcha which is there on the screen. We'll assign it to this also, right? So we need this, correct? And Then apart from this, what we need is aggregations, right? And that is where we define what all aggregations we need. Oh, so what we need is first is uh, label, right? And because that is where we'll have our uh, um, the display of the captcha, what value will it contain, what it will have, right? So what we need to define here is that, okay, label, what will be its type. So you mention that, okay, it will be, this aggregation will be typically sap.m.label with of course all capital, right? Let's first define these, then I'll add more properties, right? Then you will have is, apart from it, you will have input, right, where you will say I'll have input, right? I will extend these type properties. Give me one sec, let me just quickly get this done. I'm adding two aggregation, one is for refresh and one is for input. Later we'll show you how to use one only with just one. As of now I'm just keeping two aggregation for the heck of it, right? And what this is, refresh is a type of button, so I'll add it as button. This is a submit, is also button. I could have combined refresh and submit into one, but for the purpose of demo and keeping things simple, I'm doing this. But I'll let in towards the end we will see how do we kind of make this thing as something like how do we make it one aggregation using multiple elements, right? So by default we'll say it's multiple, as in how many aggregation is like it will contain one value or multiple values. So I'll say no, not multiple, it is false, it will be just having one child element inside it, right, for all. That is what I will do in the end, that I'll make this multiple as true, and then we'll see this refresh and submit is getting defined under one function, right? And then by default we will say their visibility is hidden. Okay, so there's a by default which we are setting that they are not be visible, right? And so we have defined that, okay, my captcha control will have heading which will be at the top, then it will have some value. Now this heading will be like a combination, we'll see how do we utilize, we'll try to see it. And then you have these aggregation, it will contain one label, one input, one refresh, one submit button, right? And then let's have something like and define an event which will be like events. And so what shall we do, we shall have something like let's call this event as validation. Valid one is this, like this event will be triggered if the captcha which is entered is a valid one, okay, on pressing of submit. So let's say you entered a captcha and you press submit button, this event will get triggered, and this will be triggered highlighting that, okay, whatever you have entered is valid, right? And in valid, this event will also have a parameters, right? What parameter? It will have a value, which value it will be like which will be of type string, the same way like we have done earlier, right? So when we say string, what exactly is like this, while this event is being fired, we will have a value being passed to it, okay? And then do we need something else? No, I think that's fair enough. So we have our control which is captcha, whose properties we have defined, aggregation defined, events we have defined, right? So this is something which we discussed, right? Now what shall happen next is, so next is you have defined the metadata, but uh, how do you instantiate this controller, right? This control. So what you do is you say during the init function, where you actually initiate your control, right? So what you do is you say this dot set aggregation, right? uh, then which aggregation I'm talking about? I'm talking about underscore input, right? And what I'm saying is that you pass, since we have just defined multiple as false, so I say new input, right? And new input, where it is coming from, we'll need to add it here because we are using it, right? Because we are now, what we are trying to do is we are trying to build the layout of our control kind of thing. We'll write it also using a renderer, right? So but as of now, let me just quickly, so we are using input, right? And then we are using let us first add all the dependencies, right? So next we are using is label, next we are using is button. So I'll use label as well as button, right? So we want that this is new input, typical JS syntax which we use, right? And then for the timing we just say value for this is, let's say input is hard coded. Let's just hard code it, right? We'll set it dynamically. As of now, let's just hard code it, okay? And so this is how we want to set this aggregation, right? Let me just copy it, and then I say underscore label, and label has an aggregation text, and that also we are hard coding it, okay? Don't worry about this, because we will implement the logic of generation of this captcha code dynamically and all. For the timing, I'm just trying to hard code stuff so that at least something appears on screen. So now this refresh is a button, okay? And what do you want? So for this, I want to differentiate it in a via color. So we know that if we define text as type as except, it will be green, else it will be we can define some other type also, for example reject for red. And then I say what should be the text of it, it should be refresh, right? And what else you want? Basically on press of this button, what shall happen? So for this I say this dot underscore on refresh. I'm just putting this, we'll define these methods slowly, okay? So I say this underscore on refresh, and along with this what I do is I also because I need to pass the context also of what this is referring to, I use bind. Bind is typically when you want to let the function know that what this refers to. So in this case, this will refers to the what thing, right? So that is why I need to pass this thing to it, right? Let me just put it in a better way, because otherwise this is a press event, right? And then type also here, right? And then what we see is dot bind this that we also add a let's not add a style class as of now, we'll add it later, because let's see what happens. Then I copy this and I say this is reject and text is submit, and then I say on submit. Basically once you submit, what will happen, right? I'm putting this brackets, there's no need. So these bracket, I just need to pass the name, and so we are good, right? So we have our defined our that, okay, this is what our, once you use this captcha controller, right, this captcha control in your controller or in your XML views, this init first this metadata will be there, right, which tells what all is needed, right? how what this control contains, and then this will define that on initiation it will automatically assign the values which methods to be called when, right? Now there is one more thing which is still left. Of course there are many things, which is what will happen once, how it will get rendered, right? That is very important. So for that, what has SAP has UI5 has done is it has provided us a standard function by the name of renderer. Okay, and this renderer has two things. One is it has two parameters. One is their control, this one, and another is this render manager. ORM is nothing but render manager, which basically take care of the things. So you have control, right, which refers to our control. So how do we write is basically you have to typically do rm dot when you start writing you have to say open start. Let me quickly get this from our some sample code. Let's see, custom controls, yes. Let's try to get it something from here, this one, to save our time. So then we'll go through this. Okay, so this is like you see open start, that's a division, right, div, and then class I don't have, and open, and then it renders its control, right? In our case it's rendering is rating. No, we don't have. We will first render a label, so we will say underscore label, then we will render a input. That first label will be rendered, then input, and then we'll have refresh buttons. So refresh and submit. So I'll just copy it, and then this, what is this one, submit one. So this so we are telling this render managers that you render first label, then input, then refresh, then submit, right? Where are these button functions defined? So maybe quickly let me define it so that they will not do anything as of now, but we will define something for them, not now but after some time, maybe within next few minutes. So if I just say alert, what is this, refresh, okay, and then I copy this and I say on submit. You must be noticing there is nowhere this event valid is being fired, which is okay for us. Nowhere this heading is also used, that is also okay for us. Okay, as of now we are not using it, slowly we will use it, right? So now if I go to my view, right, so how do we basically use these things in our view, right? So all you need to do is, first is you need to load this control. So all you need to say is xmlns colon Captcha, let me call it as CA, and then in this you basically provide the path com dot te dot Captcha, right, dot control. I would have copied Captcha. So I think that's okay till control is also fine because it will automatically load that. So I say that you load from there, right? And then how do I define here? I say CA colon, what is the name, Captcha, inside this Captcha, right? And then it automatically gets closed. Now we need to define the properties, which is like I say what property it has heading and value. We'll keep heading and value, but nothing will happen as of now. You will just see them as if like they are there, but nothing will happen as of now. So it's like a captcha control, Okay, and then I say that's it. I think I don't need to do another thing, right? Cam dot captcha com dot t dot captcha. So that's it. So we just say that that's a basic one. As of now, there is nothing. Only even heading is not bound. It is not flowing into the control. It is just that we are expecting that it will at least render this. So all I need to do is now is start our stuff. So I say is and if I serve. Let's try to run it. Let's see what happens. What did I do wrong? Oh, that's I think case sensitive. Okay. Yeah. At least there is no error. That's a good thing, right? So it is running on a local host. Let's go to local host. I open my next.html. Let's see if something happens or nothing happens, right? Looks like we have some issue, right? Let's see. It is still loading. Wow, so there's some hope that it might load. This console. Unknown setting for text for class this. Okay, because let me hide it, because label has text. This is label, my bad. Because label doesn't have any text property. It has label has text property but now value. Input has a value one. Let's see. Yeah, you see this, don't worry about this. So submit is there in red, but why is our refresh not there? Why is submit in red? Because we have defined it as except this is reject, right? And underscore refresh as okay, you see the mistake. We have only defined for refresh, we haven't defined for submit. It's again copy paste. So I just say submit, and so now you will see two buttons. One is for submit, another is for refresh, because I defined two times. So this refresh with accept got overwritten by this one. So now you will see two buttons and everything. Yes, and if I just click, you see this refresh and submit. So we have a quick control, right? You can reuse it across your different views. You can publish it as a library across objects, across apps. You can use anything, anyways. So good thing is that this basic stuff is working, right? Now we got into the details of as in how do we first what else do we want to do. First is we want that our this thing shall be dynamic, right? Number one, there should be some spacings, and whatever user enters, we should validate it. If there is a refresh button pressed, it shall refresh this code, right? So what we will do is we will add some style classes to first take care of our what do we call it is our initial look and feel. So what I will do is I'll say dot add style class, and then you say SAP. The small margin class is there with us, right? Small margin, and we will use the same one everywhere. So we need some margin, I'll add it everywhere with an enter. That is more better, right? Here it is fine, here it is fine. Let it reload, and then let's have a look here, right? SAPUI dot small margin, again I think S should be capital. Case. So that shall bring in with some margin, and SAPUI small margin is not defined. Why? Why it is not defined? Another mistake. It is not a variable. It is a string. So let's see if something happens. Good. There is some, I think we need some margins on the left hand side, otherwise it is a bit caught up, right? So what we can do in this case is let's have our while rendering we can add a class here, right, which is like we can have add a style class. So on my class, and I'll say Captcha margins. Captcha only. Let's call it as a Captcha, right? So let's just add this class, right? And then I say all I need is a margin left 10 pixel. That's it. So now if I just look at our stuff, so you have this margin, which is good. So at least it is looking a bit better, right? And moving on to our next step, right, which is related to, somehow we should add this whatever okay, we'll start first with handling the now the our control is already, we shall first start handling this generation of this new thing dynamically. This uh, code, alphanumeric code, it shall generate dynamically. So for that, what we will do is, will not, there are a number of ways. Either I can code a very simple function, or I can turn it around and use something complex, or because we are trying to explore stuff, and let's try to bring in another library, right, third party library, which is Lodash, right? And we'll use Lodash, okay? And this is like uh, it is uh, it is very simple in the sense, for example, for your different array iteration operation, let's say you have to find duplicates, you have to sort, you have to find some random numbers, we don't need to write too much code. Lodash actually help us, right? So Lodash actually, let me just open it in it's CDN1 version, right? So that Lodash min.js CDN files. So yes, basically we will be using this Lodash, and it has already an inbuilt function, right, which is it names by sample size. So what you need to do is you need to pass to it set of characters as well as strings, and you tell for how long a random string, alphanumeric string you want to generate, it automatically generates it, rather than I coding everything here. So I thought of maybe having, taking everything from why don't we use an existing one, library one, right, low dash, so that you are also able to take care of it in your respective applications. So what I will do is, as we have done in our previous object project, I'll just say lib, and then under it I'll say low dash. Okay, and then we have this, right? I just copy pasted it. So now how do I bring in here? So for that, we typically use our AMD definition, right? So all I need to do is typically write com slash te slash captcha slash, we have it in resources slash lib slash low dash, right? And here also I had it. So although this not needed, because once this library is loaded, it is loaded in a global way. Okay, so for that, let's try to first check its usage in our on refresh function, so that you are able to see how it works, right? So we'll say let our value, right, and value is the string. We'll say that s value is equal to, all you need to refer to is using an underscore, right, underscore dot, and then what you can do is you can call that function with a sample size. This is now under this low dash library has loaded under a global scope of underscore, right? And then to it, what you need to pass is your array. For example, I want an alpha numeric character, right? So and using which, right, let's say using all these one, let's have this, right? And we also have 1 2 3 all also, right? Out of these, we want to have pick a random 5 characters, and which 5 characters it will return as an array, and I want to join them using this, right? And let us let's just see, does this low dash actually return us something or not. So if I go to this, it hasn't loaded. Why? Let me just open console, because it is there. Oh, I have dot here. Okay, so if we go back and I just use a slash, now it shall work. Maybe let me just make this thing a bit smaller again, and again we have an error. It cannot load this from load.js. What is not there? Okay, this is a problem. So we have just name it as load.js. We just add js, right? And now it shall work, I believe. Let's see what happens now. Looks fine, hopefully. Yeah, so now what we have written is that in case you click on refresh, then we shall see some random value. You see 1EC40. Again, you see there's only thing to be noted is that it will not repeat the characters. Rest all it is working. Okay, so I think this is working. So what do we need? So we need a function which is, let's say, get captcha or get value, right? And this shall basically return this value, right? So that we shall return this value whenever it is called. For example, if you call refresh, we will call this function. Okay, so I have kind of and I say return as well. Make sense? So now we will call this functions once you basically kind of do a refresh, right? But what exactly do you need is you need is kind of you need these values to be mapped, right? So before that, let's just because we have already hard coded this label as a text, let's just put it as this dot get value and stuff, not set. We shall have uh, get value, because as soon as your control is initiated, it shall automatically kind of get the value which is randomly generated, right, and pass to it. Let's just press save and see what happens on the front end. I hope it shall work, but we don't know how many errors or something what is waiting. Okay, so if I just say this, you can see there is a, you can see this is working, right? So this is working, but this refresh is not updating it. Only when if I just say refresh, then it is updating, right? So we need something which shall actually update once kind of you have pressed the refresh button, right? So what shall we do is let's go back to our code, is somehow once I press this refresh, then I shall have the value also updated, right? So how we can do that is I can say this, let's what we do is let s value is equal to this, we are getting this value, then this dot get aggregation, right? Which aggregation is it for our label? It is underscore label, right? So I will read that aggregation, right? And then since it is just single, which will return me only one instance, not multiple, and I can directly use set text because it is a label. We can change its values using get and set, right? So all I am saying is that you read this aggregation and you set the value. So if I just go back and now if we click refresh, this value should get refreshed, right? So let's just see. If I just, you see this, and if I just put a breakpoint in our get value and I press refresh, you see the call stack. Once that's, so it is being calling on refresh button, which is this one, right? And on refresh, it is calling get value, where it is this get value, and we get a value of A54GK, and then we are returning it. Once it is returned, right? So now let me make it a little bit big, right? And so once I am returning this value of s value, right, now it is using this set aggregation. Get aggregation is label, which is like, let me just put it in a console for better understanding, and it gives a that label one, single one, because it is not multiple. And then I'm using text button, basically set text to update the value, which is A54GK, and you can see that. So at least our this is working, right? Now before we go on to the next part, you have not you have seen that we have not, we have defined some heading in our view here, but it is not reflected anywhere, right? So how do we do that? So for that, what we need to do is we shall go to our render manager, and where it is rendering, so here we can use we can directly write, okay, a div, okay, and then inside it you can write dollar single quote for control. What is this? This is a property. So, and that property name is heading. So once you create this property, these getter and setters are automatically created. And we'll come to the event also, what is created when those events are triggered, right? So I'm saying get heading, whatever is there in the control, right? And just you simply write it, right? So first it will write that heading, then label, then input, then refresh, then submit, and just press save. And if I go here, it is reloading. I hope it will work. You see this Captcha control, right? Rest you can handle it, the margins and everything can be handled by us, right? So that is still okay. So now we have this here, which is also getting rendered. So we now know that how those values are getting rendered, right? This one heading, but we haven't used value, right? How do we get or set this property? For example, how do we use it? So what we can do is that as soon as this value is generated, we will update the property value, okay? And as soon as somebody will enter some value in our input, we will cross validate it with our property value, which is set on the overall control of Captcha. Okay, so how do we do that is we'll see. So first is in our get value, before returning, I'm saying this dot get property, this dot set property, because I want to update the value. And then you provide the field name, which is this, and then what is the value, right? And you say true. It is s value, I'm sorry, s value. So now we have updated the property that okay, as soon as any value is updated, this value basically shall be updated, right? And okay, so this is fine. So what is next? So what is next is as soon as somebody's, so now we have this value, the value which is randomly generated, although I can read that label aggregation also to read that value using this dot get aggregation label dot get text, but I wanted to use this value property which is set not at a label level but at our Captcha level, right? The Captcha property. So on submit, what I will do is I will do a comparison. I will say if this dot get aggregation and underscore input, because it is an input field, it will have, we can use get value is equal to this dot get property, right? And what is the property name? Value. So if they are equal, right, I will do something. As of now, I will say alert match, right? And else I will say I could use a message box also if you want, but as of now we'll use that. Let me just show it how it works actually, right? And I will say here mismatch. Okay, so I'm reading that input aggregation value, I'm checking what value is set in my property on my control property. If they match, it is okay, else it is a mismatch, right? And let me do a formatting also. So this is saved. Let's just hope it works, and then we will bring it to the next level. So if let's say there is ABCDF you have entered, and where is my on submit button? On submit, here it is. If I'm saying submit, it says mismatch because this value is mismatching. And if I just copy this and paste this, and if I just submit, then it says match. Good. So at least we now know that how these values are getting updated on the control level or not on the label level. For example, if I just refresh this, now at control level I have this value BFKG4, but at aggregation level on input I have C06A7. So let's just see submit. It should be a mismatch. Bingo, we are good. So far, let me just quickly pause here and cover what we have seen. We have seen the usage of properties. How do we set them? How do we write using render manager? We have seen how do we read aggregations, right? But one thing which you haven't seen is this event. How do we trigger this event and how do we use it, right? So what I can say is that when this event occurs, when valid, so this shall trigger on valid, okay, and this will trigger an on valid event, okay, and then what else do we need? This is okay, and our event name is valid, okay. So now what do we want is that in case this event is triggered, right, it shall fire an event valid, and once that event fire will be triggered, then its handler, which is on valid, shall update the, shall also display a message. So that message shall not be displayed here, it shall be displayed from the view controller, right? So how we can do that is we can say this dot fire event, and then you can mention the event name, whatever is the event name you have kept, and then here what you can do is actually pass the value, what value you want to pass. So for that I'll say comma and value, and we can definitely read this. This is this, right? So now we are passing the values, right? What value is being passed, and then we are done, right? So this will trigger this event, right? And let me just quickly go to our controller, main controller, and this is where we will do is we'll create our then that event, which is what do we call on valid one, right? On valid common function o event or whatever you want to call it. For the timing I'll just say alert triggered. We'll read the values, right? So this event is triggered, but I'm just, as of now I'm just triggering the value, but once we have this event, then I will show you how do we also kind of use it, right? And we have on valid, this all looks okay. So let's try it then we don't have here, I hope we get this event triggered, and okay, go man. So we know that this event is triggering once we have let me do all breakpoints console, it is loading. So now we know this event is triggering if we enter a valid one. Invalid one will show mismatch, good. I copy this, I paste here, it will go to this. Now it will fire an event, and which is here, right? And let's see, you see this? So this is how it triggers it. So you have kind of event triggers which are happening from here, right? And it goes there and it actually triggers it. Now you can read this value also. Let's do that again. So if I just press this, it will trigger the event. Now if you go this, right, and if you just say get parameter, and what is the parameter name, value, and you will see the results. You see this 3d615, and we will use that. So we'll say, rather than doing this, I'll say go to main controller, alert, and what is this thing called valid captcha. Then I say dollar, this one and this, right? And add with spellings. So let it just reload. You can do all the coloring and modification as per your need and all, right? What is missing is, okay, this one. So you can do all the beautification, add everything to your control. That is more or less okay, right? But primarily I can control n number of views and reuse this, right? Add my registration, login, or whatever you want to. So if I just say copy this, submit, go. Valid captcha 17K13. Good. So far, what we have seen is, let's just quickly do a recap so that you are aware. We do is we created a file under control Captcha, and a control has property metadata, which has properties, events, aggregation, association also. Same way like aggregations, you have association. Aggregations are typically a very tight kind of a relationship where these labels, inputs, and refresh is all our children's. Association is a loose kind where you can be associated, for example, to another text box or to another view. But on destruction of, as in, if for example you're associated to something else, and if the parent is deleted, the association still remains. But in case of aggregations, in case you destroy the parents, the corresponding children are also deleted. For example, if I destroy our control, which is Captcha, then all these aggregations will get deleted. But if these were associations, they would have remained. Right now, since our properties, heading, and value also generate automatically, the framework provides us with getter and setter method. Same way for valid, for our event valid, we have I believe three methods which are created by default. One is I believe attach, detach, and fire, I believe. So might be something else, but there are three methods which are already created. You can try to reuse it. But in our case, what we are doing is, in case there is a valid captcha, I'm just firing a event using a general fire event method and passing the event name and the values, right? So that's how what we have done so far. Now, one thing which is pending, or which I said I will cover it at the end, it is regarding this multiple one, right? So for example, if I say this multiple as true, right, so that means under this binding aggregation underscore refresh, you can have many buttons, right? So for example, in that case, what we will do is not use set aggregations, we will use add aggregation. So let me just try to show you one thing. So I first added one button for refresh. Let me add again another button, same thing, just to highlight to you what is happening. With same thing, add aggregation underscore refresh 2 times. But while rendering using render manager, you need to basically, because this will return you two things, right? First, because there are two buttons, two things. So either I can do like this, use an array for first one, and for second one, generally it is like you can formalize it to read the array length, and you can then go on looping it. But I'm just, in the interest of the time, I'm trying to highlight how it happens. So I say you first write the first refresh, then second refresh. So let's just look at what is happening on the control side. You see this, there are two refresh, right? And in case I change this, for example, if I just make it refresh 1, then you will see here refresh 1. Let's just wait. Somehow my system loads very slow. So you can see refresh 1. Okay, so I think our more or less our reusable captcha control is ready, and it is time now to do a recap quick one, as we are done with our project 8. So we created a reusable control captcha with some properties and aggregations and an event. We made this, when the control is instantiated, we have added the values, what all is expected in each, should be there in each aggregation. Then the render manager is triggered, and we have added those all, what all rendering is needed. Then somewhere we are storing the values also, what value should be assigned to those properties, and somewhere we are firing the event also, so that those events can be handled once they are triggered in our application control. So with this, we come to an end of this project 8. I hope you have enjoyed it, and it makes some sense and you learn something out of it. So be ready for our project 9 and project 10. Thank you for watching. Keep sharing, keep learning. Bye bye. Stay safe.